would like to purchase a pre-printed fabric panel, please go to spoonflower.com and type Kathy Schmitz in the search bar without any spaces. You can also hold your phone's camera over the QR code and a small yellow tab will pop up. Click on the tab and it will take you to my Spoonflower shop. Please order a fat quarter on Petal Signature Cotton. Thanks! So here we have the finished pieces, and I wanted to show you what I chose to do with quilting. On this one I just used an Ecro sewing thread and just hand quilted some big stitches around wherever there was like a ditch. And then on this one I did the same thing, only I used some green heavier weight thread, like a 12 weight thread, so you can see it a little bit more. And then on the red one, and this is the one I'm going to bind, I went ahead and did some hand quilting around the individual designs. And by hand quilting, I mean really rough running stitches. And then I did machine quilting in the ditch. So it was a lot of stop and start, but I kind of like that. I think the finished look. And you know, after I show you what it looks like once it's bound, I'm going to wash it, and I'm hoping it's going to kind of crinkle up and look kind of old. I like that look. So I am going to bind this one, make it into a little wall hanging. Okay, welcome back. We're going to talk about the binding, and because this is a fairly large check, I thought it would look more interesting if the binding was on the diagonal. So what I have done is I've cut off all of the scraps, the edges, and I've just left the piece of fabric that's printed. Then I cut off enough to make this a square. So this is a perfect square. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to draw a line from point to point. My ruler isn't quite long enough, but I can just add another ruler so that I can make sure I'm going from point to point like that. Eventually, I'll get there. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to draw a line. I don't want to get going on the wrong place when I start cutting. So now I'm going to cut these two pieces in half. Like that. So now I have my two pieces, and the trick is the way that you align these. So we're going to flip this one over. We want right sides together, and we're going to sew two of the straight sides. We want the diagonal sides, the bias sides, to be matching up that way. So what I'm going to do is layer these together. I'm going to have the ends stick out just a little bit, like that, and pin it. And then I'm going to take a 1/4 inch seam allowance right across the end there. So here's my 1/4 inch seam allowance, sewing those two sides together. Now I'm going to take it to my iron and I'm going to press that seam open. Now, if you want this to really match up, because mine didn't really very well, you can really play around with it because there is a little bit of extra to make sure those are lined up, if that's going to bother you. Okay, I'm going to press this. So we have our pieces sewn together, they're pressed flat, and now we're going to make marks where we're going to be cutting our binding. So we're going to make this binding 2 1/4 inches. So I'm going to draw lines along one of the bias edges. So those are the long edges. I'm going to come all the way to the end, measure up 2 1/4 inches, and then make a line. This would be a cutting line. So, whoop, dang it. It's okay if you use a permanent pen or a pencil or whatever you like to use. Move my ruler down and continue the line. Now we're going to do that all the way across. So I'm going to go up here all the way to the end and measure 2 1/4 inches. Again, draw my lines. Okay, I'm going to do that all the way across. Now I'll get back to you. So I have the lines drawn. I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strips with a little extra. So what I'm going to do is pick it up in the middle so the right sides are together. So now what we want to do is we want to align these drawn lines, but we don't want to align them like this or like this and sew them together. Otherwise, when we cut them apart, they'll just be loops. We want to offset it by 1. So we want this line to pair up with that line. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit, or this way. So it'll be more like that is the loop. So the trick will be, we want these to be lined up, and you're going to need to check that it's 1/4 inch by sticking a pin straight through, and you're hoping that you're going to get on that line on the other side. So let me move that down a little bit. A little bit more. And this is the part that's going to take a little finesse, but it is really worth it. So now that I have those lined up, I'm going to pin that in place and move on to the next one. And we want that to be lined up the same way. Oops. There's 1/4 inch. There's 1/4 inch. Okay. So there we go. And because this is a bias, you're going to have a little bit of play in there. You don't want a lot, but there will be a little forgiveness. So I'm going to go down 1/4 inch and then through this side 1/4 inch. Line that up. And there's one more. And then once we get that pinned and we double check that our lines are all going to meet up at the 1/4 inch, then we're going to sew that seam. So I've sewn that seam together, and I've pressed that seam open, and now all I have to do is cut a continuous line, loop de loop de loop, and it will make one nice long piece of bias binding. And of course, there's lots of ways of doing bias binding, but I just think this is kind of cool because it uses a lot less seams. You don't have to think about all the seams that you have to make, the other ways to do it. Isn't that cool? And see, there's a lot more character, I think, to a bias check than there would be if it was just a simple fold over like that. Especially since it's not too dark, because we really wanted to add a little more contrast to the border usually. So, and the reason why I didn't print like a solid color was because I did try that actually. And because Spoonflower prints digitally, it just really lays the ink on top of the fabric and it doesn't soak in, and so it makes the fabric very stiff. So I did receive the solid fabric and it was so stiff. I just thought there's just no way that this is going to work. So that is why I decided to go with a fabric that didn't have quite as much ink on it. Okay, I'll finish sewing this up. Here we have the finished wall hanging. So I have to tell you, between the last clip and this one, I've moved, and the little wall hanging that I made is somewhere packed away, and I have looked high and low and I cannot find it. Luckily, my mom made one also. Hers doesn't have the little quilting stitches around the outside of these, but it does show you the finished binding on here. And I did wash mine. I remember that, and I liked the way it turned out. My mom does not want me to wash this, so I can't wash it to show you what it looks like washed, but I think it turned out cute washed. I sure wish I could find it. I apologize. It's been kind of a crazy year. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed doing this monthly stitch along, and hopefully I'll be doing another one in the future. I have an idea for a Christmas one for next year, so I'll keep you posted. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter. You can do that through my website at kathyschmitz.com. And here's to a happy new year. Take care. Bye.